Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Partners in Success. The Seattle rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Datavault Technologies' executive conference room as Max Mahoney reviewed the quarterly reports with satisfaction. Their cybersecurity firm had grown from a two-man operation in his garage to a $100 million enterprise in just 5 years. Across the mahogany table, his business partner Ross Bradshaw flashed that practice smile that had helped seal countless deals. Another record quarter, Ross said, adjusting his expensive Italian suit. Our government contract alone are pulling in $40 million annually. Max nodded, his weathered hands, marked by old scars that most people never noticed, carefully arranging the documents. At 42, he maintained the disciplined bearing of his former life, though few knew about his 15 years with the CIA's Special Activities Center. To the tech world, he was simply a brilliant former military contractor who'd found his calling in digital security. The Pentagon is requesting expanded access to our quantum encryption protocols, Max said. They want to integrate our systems into their most classified networks. Ross's eyes gleamed with something that might have been greed, though he masked it quickly. That's substantial. Those protocols are worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions to the right buyer. The comment sent a small chill through Max, but he dismissed it. Ross had always been aggressive about monetizing their innovations. It's what made him an effective business partner, even if his methods sometimes bordered on ruthless. Their company specialized in creating unhackable server architectures for government and military clients. Max handled the technical development, while Ross managed sales and client relations. It was a partnership built on complementary skills and mutual trust, or so Max had believed. My father called earlier, Max mentioned, gathering his papers. He's flying in from Portland tomorrow to visit Alice and the kids. Haven't seen him in 3 months. How's Alfred doing? Ross asked, though his attention seemed focused on his phone. Stubborn as ever at 78. Still insists on living alone in that old house. Max smiled fondly. Alice keeps trying to convince him to move closer, but you know how veterans are about independence. Ross barely looked up. Right. Hey, I need those master server code for the new Pentagon contract. Compliance wants to verify our security architecture before final approval. Max paused. The server codes Ross was requesting would provide administrative access to their most sensitive systems, including the classified protocols they developed for military clients. It was information that should never exist in a single location, which is why Max had designed multiple layers of authorization. Those codes are compartmentalized for a reason, Max said carefully. Each segment requires dual authorization. Even I don't have complete access without the secondary verification. Come on, Max. We're partners. I need to demonstrate our security measures to the compliance team. Ross's smile faltered slightly. You don't trust me? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Max had built his career on reading people, and something in Ross's tone triggered old instincts. But they'd been partners for 5 years, had built this empire together. Paranoia was an occupational hazard from his former life. It's not about trust, Max said finally. It's about proper security protocols. Even the Pentagon doesn't want all their access codes in one place. Ross's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Fine, we'll do it the hard way. As they prepared to leave, Max noticed Ross lingering by the secure terminal that connected to their main servers. Forget something? Just checking the backup status, Ross said smoothly. You know how paranoid I am about data loss. Max studied his partner's reflection in the rain-streaked windows. Something had shifted in Ross lately, subtle changes in behavior that his trained mind cataloged automatically. More private phone calls, meetings that weren't on the shared calendar, questions about security measures that went beyond normal business concerns. But Alfred Mahoney had raised his son to trust until given reason not to. Max's father had been a decorated Marine who'd taught him that loyalty was earned through time and proven through adversity. Ross had been there through the company's struggles, had fought alongside him to build something meaningful. As Max drove home through Seattle's evening traffic, He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. 20 years in intelligence had taught him that the most dangerous threats often came from those closest to you, but had also taught him the cost of constant suspicion. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Alice. Kids asking when Uncle Ross is coming to dinner again. They miss his magic tricks. Max smiled despite his concerns. Ross had always been good with Max's children, 10-year-old Franklin and 8-year-old Ellen. Whatever doubts were nagging at him, family came first. His father's visit would be a welcome distraction from business concerns. He had no way of knowing that Ross Bradshaw had already set in motion events that would shatter his world within hours. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The next morning brought concerning news. Max arrived at the office to find their head of security, Wilson Proctor, waiting with a grim expression. Wilson was a former NSA analyst whom Max had recruited personally, a man whose judgment he trusted implicitly. We had unauthorized access attempts on server Bank 7 last night, Wilson reported, handing Max a detailed log. Someone was probing our quantum encryption storage. Max studied the data, his blood cooling. Server Bank 7 housed their most classified military contracts, information that could compromise national security if it fell into the wrong hands. More troubling, the access attempts had come from inside their network. Internal probe? Max asked. Has to be. The query's signatures match our administrative protocols. Wilson's weathered face was troubled. Someone with high-level credentials was fishing for the encryption keys. Who was in the building after hours? Security shows Ross left at 11:47 p.m., but the access attempts continued until 3:15 a.m. Max felt that familiar tightening in his chest. The same sensation he'd experienced before ambushes in Afghanistan, before double agents revealed themselves in Prague. Could he have remote access? Not to those servers. They're air-gapped for precisely this reason. Wilson paused. Unless someone gave him the bridge codes. The implications were staggering. Ross had been pushing for broader system access for weeks, claiming it was for client demonstrations and compliance reviews. Max had refused, maintaining the security protocols that protected billions of dollars worth of classified technology. Pull Ross's access logs for the past month, Max ordered. I want to know every system he's touched, every file he's accessed. As Wilson left to compile the data, Max's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized from his CIA days. Preston Moss, his former handler who now worked in private intelligence. Max, we need to talk. Preston's voice was unusually tense. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the usual place? The usual place was a small coffee shop in Pike Place Market where Preston had debriefed him during his transition out of the agency. Max hadn't heard from him in 2 years. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The drive through Seattle gave Max time to think. His instincts, honed by decades of intelligence work, were screaming warnings. Ross's recent behavior, the unauthorized access attempts, Preston's urgent call, none of it felt coincidental. Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual chaos of tourists and vendors. Max found Preston at a corner table, looking older than his 55 years. Gray streaked his temples, and worry lines had deepened around his eyes. Your partner's been making inquiries, Preston said without preamble, reaching out to some very questionable contacts in the private intelligence sector. What kind of inquiries? The kind that suggest he's looking to sell information. High-value technical specifications, encryption protocols, server architectures. Preston's expression was grim. The kind of information that foreign intelligence services pay handsomely for. Max felt the pieces clicking into place, a puzzle he'd been unconsciously assembling for weeks. He's been trying to get access to our classified servers. It gets worse. We intercepted communications suggesting he's been in contact with Marcus Kane. The name hit Max like a physical blow. Marcus Kane was a former CIA operative who'd gone rogue 15 years ago, selling American intelligence to the highest bidder. He was also the man responsible for the deaths of 3 of Max's team members in a blown operation in Syria. Kane's assembling a theft operation, Preston continued. Your company's quantum encryption technology is worth hundreds of millions on the black market. But more importantly, The classified military networks it protects contain information that could compromise every major U.S. intelligence operation worldwide. Max's hands remained steady, but inside, the cold fury of betrayal was building. Ross wasn't just stealing from their company. He was preparing to sell out American national security. "There's more," Preston said. Kane's crew specializes in high-end corporate espionage with extreme prejudice. They don't just steal information. They eliminate loose ends. That includes partners who might talk and family members who might be liability. The implications struck Max like lightning. Alice, the children, his father, they were all potential targets. Ross knew their routines, their security measures, their vulnerabilities. "How long do I have?" "Based on the intelligence we've gathered, they're moving fast. Days, maybe hours." Max's mind shifted into operational mode. The same calculating coldness that had kept him alive through 15 years of covert operations. His agency nickname hadn't been the Ghost because of his desk work. It was because he could move through enemy territory unseen, strike without warning, and vanish without a trace. "I need to get my family to safety. Already arranged. There's a safe house in the mountains. Alice and the kids can be there within 2 hours." Preston slid him a key and address. "Your father's more complicated. He's stubborn, won't leave his house without a damn good reason." Max pocketed the information. "I'll handle my father." "Max," Preston's voice carried a warning. "Kane's people are professionals. They'll be watching, waiting for you to make a move. The moment you deviate from normal patterns. Let them watch," Max said quietly. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." As he walked back through the market, Max's phone buzzed with a cheerful text from Ross. "Dinner tonight? Alice mentioned she's making her famous lasagna. Looking forward to seeing your dad." The casual intimacy of the message, the knowledge of his family's routines, the pretense of friendship, it all crystallized into something harder than diamond and twice as sharp. Ross Bradshaw had made a fatal mistake. He'd threatened Max's family while forgetting that some ghosts never truly rest. Chapter 3. The Ghost Awakens. At 3:17 a.m., Max's secure phone shattered the silence like a gunshot. The caller ID showed Portland General Hospital, and his blood turned to ice. "Mr. Mahoney? This is Dr. Ellen Buckley in the emergency room. Your father Alfred was brought in an hour ago. You need to come immediately." Max was already moving, muscle memory from countless midnight operations taking over. "How bad is it?" "Critical, but stable." "Sir, this wasn't an accident. Someone did this to him." The 2-hour drive to Portland became 90 minutes of controlled fury. Max's mind cataloged the implications while his hands remained steady on the wheel. Ross had moved faster than Preston's intelligence had indicated. The attack on his father was both reconnaissance and intimidation, a message that no one was beyond reach. Portland General's emergency room reeked of antiseptic and desperation. Dr. Buckley, a tired woman in her 40s, led him through corridors that reminded him of field hospitals in too many war zones. "The injuries are extensive," she explained. "Multiple fractures in both hands, severe electrical burns, signs of prolonged torture. But your father's tough. He's conscious and asking for you." Alfred Mahoney lay connected to machines that monitored his failing body, but his eyes burned with the same fierce intelligence that had survived 3 tours in Vietnam and 30 years as a police detective. His hands were wrapped in bandages, the chemical burns on his arms telling a story of calculated cruelty. "Son," his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of urgent warning. "Your business partner." He came to the house. Max felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. "Dad, don't talk. Just rest." "No." Alfred's grip on his son's hand was surprisingly strong. "He wanted your server codes. Said he'd hired a wet work team to hit your house tonight. When I refused," the old man's voice broke. "He used a car battery on me for hours." The clinical details of torture, electricity applied methodically to extract information, painted a picture that made Max's vision narrow to a red tunnel. Ross hadn't just betrayed their partnership. He'd tortured a 78-year-old man for information that could compromise national security. "He said you wouldn't care about an old man dying," Alfred continued. each word costing him effort. Told me you'd give him the codes to save your wife and children. I told him he didn't know my son. Max squeezed his father's hand gently. You did good, Dad. You protected everyone. There's more. He had photos of Alice picking up the kid from school, of your house, your routines. This isn't just about money, son. This is systematic. Through the hospital window, dawn was breaking over Portland. Max's secure phone showed 17 missed calls from Alice, 12 from Preston, and 43 text messages. The trap was closing, but Ross had made a crucial error. He'd given Max time to prepare, and more importantly, he'd given him justification for what came next. Dad, I need you to listen carefully. Alice and the kids are safe. They're in federal protection. But I need you to stay here, stay visible, act like you told them everything. Alfred's eyes sharpened. You're going active. It wasn't a question. Max's father had been there during his son's recruitment into the CIA, had watched him transform from an idealistic young Marine into something harder and more dangerous. He recognized the shift in Max's posture, the change in his voice. They call me the Ghost for a reason, Max said quietly. Ross forgot that some operations never truly end. How bad do you need this to get? However bad it takes. Max's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd crossed moral lines before and survived the consequences. They threatened my children, Dad. They tortured you. There are no rules anymore. Alfred squeezed his son's hand one final time. Then God help them, because I know you won't. As Max left the hospital, his phone rang. Ross's name appeared on the screen, and when Max answered, his partner's voice carried false concern that made his jaw clench. Max, Jesus, I just heard about your father. Is he okay? He's alive, Max said, letting exhaustion color his voice. But it's bad, Ross. Really bad. I'm so sorry, man. Random break-in. That's what the police think. But Dad's a tough old bastard. He fought back. There was a pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. Did he see anything? Anyone? Max closed his eyes, hearing the greed and fear beneath his partner's manufactured sympathy. He's pretty confused. Keeps talking about server codes and car batteries. Doctor says it's trauma-induced delirium. Server codes. Ross's voice sharpened slightly. Keeps asking me about work stuff. The electrical burns must have. Never mind. Look, I need to stay here for a few days. Can you handle the Pentagon presentation? Of course. Don't worry about anything. Just take care of your family. The line went dead, and Max allowed himself a cold smile. Ross had just confirmed his guilt and revealed his timeline. The Pentagon presentation was in 3 days, the perfect cover for accessing their systems while Max was distracted by family crisis. But Ross Bradshaw had forgotten something crucial about his partner's background. The Ghost had spent 15 years hunting people who thought they were clever enough to betray the United States. He'd tracked them through Moscow, Damascus, Caracas, and a dozen other places where mercy was a luxury and justice was personal. Now he was hunting close to home. Max pulled out a different phone, one that Ross had never seen, and dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. Sammy William here. The voice was gravelly, marked by too many cigarettes and too much bourbon. It's Ghost. I need the old team. There was a long pause. Sammy had been his operations coordinator during the final years at the agency, a man who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. How permanent are we talking? They tortured my father for classified access codes. They're planning to hit my family. Max's voice carried the same ice-cold certainty that had made him legendary in certain circles. I want them to understand that some ghosts never rest. Give me 12 hours. And Max, welcome back. As Max drove toward Seattle, his reflection in the rearview mirror showed a man transformed. The successful businessman was gone, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Ross Bradshaw had awakened the Ghost. Now he was going to learn why some people are better left alone. Chapter 4. Ghosts and Shadows. 12 hours later, Max sat in the back room of a defunct warehouse in Seattle's industrial district. The space smelled of rust and old motor oil, but it provided complete privacy and soundproofing requirements for the kind of meeting he was about to conduct. Sammy William arrived first, looking older but no less dangerous. His graying beard couldn't hide the scar that ran from his left ear to his jaw, a souvenir from Kandahar. Behind him came two figures Max recognized immediately: Michael Horn and Frankie Jenkins, former Delta Force operators who transitioned to off-the-books work after their discharge. "Heard you went civilian," Michael said, his Texas drawl unchanged by 5 years. "Nice suit." "Suits don't make the man," Max replied, accepting Frankie's firm handshake. "Appreciate you coming on short notice." Sammy spread reconnaissance photos across a fold-out table. "Ran preliminary surveillance on your targets. Your partner Ross Bradshaw is dirty as they come. Bank accounts in the Caymans, encrypted communications with Marcus Kane's organization, and a property in rural Washington that's registered to a shell company." Max studied the photos. Ross's apparent wealth had always been explained by successful investments and family money, but the evidence painted a different picture. Multiple luxury vehicles, a yacht, properties that cost more than their business could justify. "Kane's crew is professional," Frankie added, pointing to surveillance photos of 3 men. "These are the wet work team your partner hired. Ex-military, extensive criminal records, specializing in corporate espionage and elimination of witnesses. They've been watching your family for weeks," Sammy continued. "Your wife's jogging route, your kids' school pickup times, your father's daily routines. They had it all mapped out." The systematic nature of the surveillance made Max's anger crystallize into something colder and more focused. This wasn't a simple betrayal or theft. It was a comprehensive operation designed to destroy his life and steal technology that could compromise American national security. "What's the timeline?" Max asked. "Tomorrow night. Ross is planning to present updated security protocols to the Pentagon compliance team, but he's really going to demonstrate the system's vulnerabilities. Once he proves he can access the classified networks, Kane's buyers will transfer payment." Michael leaned forward. "After that, your family becomes liability." The original plan was to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong, eliminate all potential witnesses. Max felt the familiar coldness settle over him, the same emotional shutdown that had allowed him to function in the darkest corners of intelligence work. Personal feelings were luxury he couldn't afford. His family's survival depended on thinking like the predator he'd once been. "I want real-time surveillance on all targets," he ordered. "Ross, Kane's crew, any property they've been using. Sammy, I need you to hack their communications. I want to know every plan, every backup, every contingency." "And then?" Frankie asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Then we remind them why they used to call me the Ghost." The next 18 hours were masterclass in operational planning. Max's civilian life had been built on legitimate success, but his skills came from a darker education. He'd learned surveillance from the best, counterintelligence from masters, and elimination techniques from people who'd never officially existed. Ross played his part perfectly, maintaining his concerned partner facade while positioning himself for the Pentagon presentation. His text messages to Max were full of sympathy and offers to handle business matters. Meanwhile, Sammy's electronic surveillance revealed the truth. Coordinates for Max's house, photos of escape routes, and detailed plans for eliminating what Ross called collateral family assets. The betrayal was complete, but Ross had made a crucial error. He'd assumed that Max's transition to civilian life had made him soft, that success and family had dulled the edges that 15 years of covert operations had sharpened to lethal precision. At 6 p.m., as Ross prepared for his treacherous presentation, Max received the confirmation he'd been waiting for. Kane's wet work team was moving into position around his house, believing Alice and the children were following their normal evening routine. They had no idea they were walking into an empty house that had been transformed into a carefully prepared trap. Max checked his equipment one final time, tools of a trade he'd hoped never to use again, but kept maintained out of ingrained habit. Tonight, the Ghost would remind Seattle's underworld why some legends never truly retire. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Ross. Presentation went great. Pentagon loves the new security features. Celebrating at the yacht club. Wish you were here. Max smiled coldly. Ross was establishing his alibi while Kane's killers moved against his family. It was tactically sound, but emotionally foolish. By involving Max's children in his betrayal, Ross had crossed a line that transformed this from business into something personal and unforgiving. As darkness fell over Seattle, Max donned the black tactical gear that had been his second skin for 15 years. Tonight, Ross Bradshaw and Marcus Kane would learn that some ghosts never rest, and some betrayals can never be forgiven. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Web. At 9:47 p.m., Kane's wetwork team approached Max's house with professional precision. Through thermal imaging equipment borrowed from his CIA contacts, Max watched from his observation post 2 blocks away as 3 figures moved through his neighborhood shadows. Their leader was Anthony Scott, a former Army Ranger turned mercenary whose file included suspected involvement in 12 corporate assassinations. His partners, Kenneth Anthony and Kirk Holcomb, were specialists in making murders look accidental. Together, they represented the kind of clean, professional violence that Marcus Kane's organization provided to clients who could afford premium service. They had no idea that Max's house had been empty for 36 hours, transformed into an elaborate trap designed to capture rather than kill. The Ghost had learned long ago that dead men tell no secrets, and he needed information before he could deliver justice. Team 2 is in position. Sammy's voice crackled through Max's earpiece. He was monitoring the operation from a surveillance van equipped with military-grade electronics. Your partner's yacht is surrounded. No movement yet. Max watched through night vision as the 3 killers disabled his home security system with practiced efficiency. They'd studied the house's layout, knew about the children's bedrooms, had planned their approach to maximize terror and minimize witnesses. The casual brutality of their preparation made his finger tighten on the trigger of his suppressed rifle. "Remember," he said into his throat mic, "I want them alive." "Copy that, Ghost. But if they resist, they won't get the chance." The killers entered through the back door, moving with the confidence of men who believed their targets were asleep upstairs. What they found instead was a house equipped with pressure sensors, motion detectors, and automated systems that Max had installed during his paranoid early years of civilian life. The first trap activated as Anthony Scott reached the bottom of the stairs. Electromagnetic locks engaged on every door simultaneously, sealing the house while flooding it with blinding strobes and deafening alarm sounds. Disoriented and trapped, the 3 men stumbled through rooms filled with smoke grenades that Max had triggered remotely. "What the hell?" Kenneth Anthony's voice was cut off as a pressurized dart struck his neck, delivering a fast-acting sedative that would keep him unconscious for hours but alive for interrogation. Kirk Holcomb managed to reach a window before the second dart found its mark. He crashed through the glass, but landed in a net that Michael Horn had positioned precisely for that contingency. Frankie Jenkins emerged from concealment to secure the semi-conscious killer with zip ties and a hood. Anthony Scott proved more resourceful, using his combat knife to jimmy the lock on the kitchen door. But Max had anticipated this, in fact, counted on the team leader's experience making him predictable. As Scott emerged into the backyard, he found himself facing the muzzle of Max's rifle. "Hello, Anthony," Max said quietly. His voice carried the flat menace of someone completely comfortable with violence. "We need to talk." The professional killer's eyes widened as he recognized something in Max's posture, the controlled stillness of a predator who'd killed more men than Scott had ever met. "You're Mahoney, but you're supposed to be dead? Your intel was bad." Max's rifle never wavered. "Drop the knife and put your hands behind your head. You know the drill." 20 minutes later, all 3 killers were secured in the warehouse where Max had planned the operation. They sat zip-tied to metal chairs, hoods removed, but their world reduced to the harsh glare of floodlights that made everything beyond the circle invisible. Max studied his captives with the clinical detachment he'd perfected during interrogations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Fear was a tool, but so was confusion. These men had expected to murder sleeping children, and instead found themselves prisoners of someone whose reputation preceded him into the room like a cold wind. "You gentlemen have been contracted to kill my family," Max began conversationally. "I'd like to know the details of that arrangement." Anthony Scott, despite his precarious position, maintained professional defiance. "We don't give up clients. You know how this works." "I know how it used to work," Max replied. "But that was when you were dealing with civilians. Tonight, you're dealing with someone who spent 15 years perfecting techniques that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams." He walked to a table covered with tools, some surgical, others industrial, all capable of causing exquisite pain without permanent damage. It was psychological theater, but effective. Kenneth Anthony was already sweating despite the warehouse's chill. "I'm going to ask questions," Max continued, selecting a small device that looked like a modified cattle prod. "You're going to provide answers. The quality of those answers will determine how quickly you leave here." "Fuck you," Scott snarled. "You're not CIA anymore. You can't." The electric shock that interrupted him was precisely calibrated, enough to cause intense pain, but no lasting damage. Max had learned the technique from experts who'd perfected it in places where international law was a distant concept. "I'm not CIA anymore," Max agreed as Scott's screams echoed through the warehouse. "Which means I'm not bound by their rules about prisoner treatment." Kirk Holcomb broke first, providing details about Marcus Kane's organization, the buyers lined up from Max's technology, and the timeline for eliminating his family. The picture that emerged was even worse than Max had suspected. A comprehensive operation designed to steal American military secrets and sell them to hostile intelligence services. "Ross has been planning this for 18 months, Holcomb gasped between electric shocks. "Ever since Kane approached him about the quantum encryption protocols. The partnership was just cover. He was always going to betray you." "Where is Kane now?" "Safe house in the mountains. But he's coming to Seattle tomorrow for the final transaction. Ross is delivering the complete server access, and Kane's flying the buyers in from overseas." Max absorbed this information while calculating the implications. Tomorrow's meeting would bring together everyone responsible for threatening his family: Ross, Kane, and the foreign agents willing to pay billions for American military secrets. It would also be their last meeting, as his prisoners were secured for transport to a CIA black site that officially didn't exist. Max's phone buzzed with another message from Ross. "Missing you at the celebration. Can't wait to share the good news. This is going to change everything for us." Max smiled without warmth. Ross was right about one thing. Tomorrow would change everything. But not in the way he expected. The Ghos was about to remind Seattle's criminal underworld why some legends are built on the bones of those who underestimate them. Chapter 6: The Betrayer's Last Dance. The next morning brought Seattle's typical gray drizzle as Max prepared for the final phase of his operation. Ross had called to suggest meeting at their office to discuss the Pentagon's new requirements, unaware that his every communication was being monitored by equipment that made NSA surveillance look primitive. Max arrived at Data Vault Technologies looking like a man burdened by family crisis. Rumpled clothes, tired eyes, the appearance of someone too distracted by personal trauma to notice professional betrayal. It was a performance that would have impressed his former CIA instructors. "Jesus, Max, you look terrible," Ross said with manufacturer concern. "How's your father?" "Stable. But the doctors say he might not remember much about the attack. Trauma-induced memory loss." Max let exhaustion color his voice while studying his partner's reaction. Relief flickered across Ross's features, exactly what Max had expected. "That's probably for the best. Some things are better forgotten." The casual dismissal of his father's suffering crystallized Max's resolve into something diamond-hard. Ross wasn't just a betrayer. He was a sociopath who viewed human suffering as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of wealth. "I need those server access codes," Ross continued, his mask of sympathy slipping slightly. "The Pentagon compliance team wants to verify our security architecture before final approval." "Ross, I've told you, those codes are compartmentalized for a reason. Even with my access, we need dual authorization from." "Max." Ross's voice carried a harder edge. "I'm not asking as your partner. I'm telling you as the majority shareholder. Give me the codes." The lie was brazen and revealing. Ross had never owned more than 49% of Data Vault Technologies, a detail he'd apparently forgotten in his eagerness to complete his betrayal. But Max played along, recognizing the moment when his partner's greed would override his caution. "Since when are you the majority shareholder?" Ross smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Since you signed the updated partnership agreement last month. You were so focused on the Pentagon contract that you didn't read the fine print." Another lie, but one that revealed Ross's desperation. He was trying to intimidate Max into compliance, using fabricated authority to justify his demands for information that could compromise national security. "Even if that were true," Max said carefully, "the codes are stored in separate, encrypted files. I'd need access to the server farm to retrieve them." Ross's eyes gleamed. "Then let's go get them." The Data Vault server farm occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in Seattle's technology corridor. Max had designed it personally, incorporating security measures that drew from his intelligence background: biometric locks, electromagnetic shielding, and surveillance systems that most government facilities would envy. As they entered the main server room, Max noticed several things that confirmed his suspicions. Cameras had been repositioned, access logs had been tampered with, and Ross moved through the facility with the confidence of someone who'd been there recently and often. "You've been here after hours," Max observed. Security walk throughs, making sure everything's properly maintained. Ross's explanation was smooth, but his body language was tense. "You know how paranoid our government clients are about physical security." Max approached the central server console, a machine that controlled access to their most classified systems. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, entering authorization codes that Ross watched with barely concealed hunger. "First-level access," Max announced as the screen flickered to life. "But I need dual authorization for the quantum encryption protocols." "So get it. That requires contact with our Pentagon liaison. He has to verify the access request through official channels." Max paused, studying Ross's reflection in the server screen. "Unless you want to explain why we're accessing classified military networks without proper authorization." Ross's patience finally snapped. "Cut the shit, Max. I know you have administrative access to every system in this building. Stop playing games and give me the codes." The mask was off now, revealing the desperate greed beneath. Max turned to face his partner, his former partner, with the cold recognition that their association was about to end permanently. "You're right," Max said quietly. "I do have access to everything." He entered a complex authorization sequence that unlocked the server room's most secure terminal. As classified files began appearing on the screen, Ross leaned forward with anticipation that was almost sexual in its intensity. "That's it," Ross breathed. "The quantum encryption protocols. The military network access codes. Everything Kane's buyers want." Max's hands stilled on the keyboard. "Kane's buyers." The slip was momentary but fatal. Ross's eyes widened as he realized what he'd revealed, but it was too late to take back the words that confirmed his partnership with Marcus Kane. "You tortured my 78-year-old father for these codes," Max said conversationally. "Hired killers to murder my wife and children. Planned to sell American military secrets to foreign intelligence services." "Max, I can explain." "No need." Max's voice carried the flat certainty of judgment rendered. "I already know everything." The server room's lights dimmed and emergency lockdown protocols engaged, a security feature that Ross didn't know Max had installed years ago. Electromagnetic locks sealed every exit, while soundproofing ensured that whatever happened next would remain private. Ross's hand moved toward the concealed pistol that Max had known about for weeks. Another detail revealed by surveillance that Ross had never suspected. But the Ghos had spent 15 years surviving encounters with enemies who were faster, better armed, and more ruthless than a greedy businessman. The gun never cleared Ross's jacket before Max's combat knife found its mark. Chapter 7. Sins of the Father. Ross collapsed against the server console, blood spreading across his expensive shirt as Max's blade found the precise point that would incapacitate without immediately killing. 15 years of tactical medicine had taught Max exactly how to hurt someone without ending their usefulness as a source of information. "The knife missed your major arteries," Max said clinically, "but you're bleeding internally. You have maybe 20 minutes before shock sets in." less if you keep struggling. Ross's eyes were wide with pain and terror as the reality of his situation crystallized. The man he betrayed wasn't the soft businessman he'd imagined. He was a predator who'd spent decades perfecting violence as both art and science. "Please," Ross gasped. "I'll call it off. The buyers, Kane, everything. I can stop it." Too late for that. Max retrieved zip ties from his tactical bag and secured Ross to the server chair. "Kane's already in Seattle. Your buyers are arriving tonight. The only variable is whether you die quickly or slowly." Through the server room's reinforced windows, Max could see Sammy's surveillance van positioning itself for optimal coverage. His team was ready for the final phase, the meeting where Marcus Kane would bring together all the players in this betrayal for what he believed would be a triumphant conclusion. Ross's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Max read it aloud. "Package confirmed. Rendezvous at 11 p.m. Yacht Club, Slip 47. Kane's rushing the timeline. Max observed. "Your failure to deliver the codes has made him nervous." "I can still get them," Ross pleaded. "Give me access to the terminal. I'll unlock everything Kane wants." Max almost smiled. Even facing death, Ross was trying to complete his betrayal. It was a level of sociopathic dedication that would have been admirable if it weren't so completely evil. "You still don't understand," Max said. "This was never about stopping your theft. This is about justice for what you did to my family." He activated the server room's communication system, and Ross's voice echoed through speakers that Kane would hear clearly. "Max knows everything. The operation is blown. Abort immediately and extract all personnel." Ross's eyes widened in horror as he realized what Max had done. By broadcasting a warning that sounded authentic, Max had ensured that Kane would accelerate his timeline rather than abort, bringing all the conspirators together in a desperate attempt to salvage their operation. "You're using me as bait," Ross whispered. "You torture my father," Max replied. "Used him as bait to get to me. Seems appropriate." Max's phone rang. Marcus Kane calling Ross's number to verify the situation. Max answered, but let Ross's labored breathing and whimpering carry across the line. "Ross? What's happening?" Max held the phone close to Ross's mouth and nodded encouragingly. His former partner had two choices: cooperate and die quickly, or resist and die slowly. The pain in his abdomen was making the decision increasingly easy. "Kane," Ross gasped. "Mahoney got me, but I can still deliver the package. Need immediate extraction." "Where are you?" "Server farm. He's got the building locked down, but there's a service entrance on the north side. 20 minutes. Kane's response was exactly what Max had anticipated. Desperation masquerading as tactical thinking. "Hold position. I'm coming with a full team." The line went dead, and Max allowed himself a cold smile. Kane was bringing his entire Seattle operation to rescue someone who was already beyond saving. It was tactically sound, but strategically foolish. Exactly the kind of mistake that arrogance bred in successful criminals. "He's coming," Ross wheezed. "You're outnumbered 10-1. "Kane's mistake," Max replied, checking his equipment one final time. "He's assuming this is about the money, the technology, the espionage. It's not. Then what?" Max's expression was carved from winter ice. "This is about a father who taught me that some things are worth killing for. You threatened my children, tortured my dad, betrayed my country. There's no amount of tactical superiority that's going to save you from what's coming." Through the server room's surveillance system, Max watched Kane's convoy approaching the building. 3 black SUVs carrying enough firepower to assault a small fortress. They had night vision, body armor, military-grade weapons, and the confidence of men who'd never encountered real opposition. They also had no idea that the building they were entering had been transformed into a killing ground by someone who'd spent 15 years learning how to turn urban terrain into a weapon. As Kane's team began their approach, Max activated systems that Ross had never known existed. Motion sensors, automated defenses, and recording equipment that would document everything for the CIA analysts who would eventually clean up the aftermath. "Last chance, Ross. Tell me about Kane's buyers. Who's purchasing American military secrets?" Ross's breathing was becoming shallower. but his eyes still held calculation. Russian intelligence, Chinese military hackers, Iranian cyber warfare division. He paused, fighting shock and blood loss. They're paying $2 billion for complete access to Pentagon networks. The number was staggering, but not surprising. Max's quantum encryption technology protected everything from submarine communications to satellite control systems. In the wrong hands, it could compromise every American military operation worldwide. "Thank you for your honesty," Max said, and meant it. Ross had provided the final piece of intelligence that would allow CIA counterintelligence to roll up the entire network of traitors and foreign agents. Outside, Kane's team was breaching the building's perimeter. Max activated his throat mic and spoke to his team. "Game time. Remember, Kane alive if possible. Everyone else is expendable." The Ghos was about to remind Marcus Kane why some legends are written in blood. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Marcus Kane entered the Data Vault server farm with the confidence of a man who'd never encountered an opponent he couldn't kill or corrupt. Behind him came 6 operatives carrying enough firepower to level a city block. Former special operations soldiers who traded patriotism for profit in the murky world of corporate espionage. What Kane didn't realize was that he was walking into a trap designed by someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of urban warfare. The building's layout had been subtly modified during construction, creating kill zones and bottlenecks that would funnel attackers into predetermined positions. Max watched through thermal imaging as Kane's team spread through the building with professional precision. They moved well, covering each other's advances and checking corners with the discipline of elite soldiers. But they were operating in an environment that Max had designed specifically to neutralize those advantages. Motion sensor triggered on floor 2. Sammy's voice crackled through Max's earpiece. 3 targets moving toward the server room. "Copy. Initiate Phase 1. The building's fire suppression system activated, flooding corridors with thick chemical smoke that turned night vision into a liability. Emergency lighting strobed in patterns that would disorient anyone not expecting them, while audio systems broadcast white noise that made communication impossible. Kane's first 2 operatives went down to tranquilizer darts fired from concealed positions. Michael and Frankie had spent hours positioning themselves in the building's blind spots. The unconscious men would live, but they'd wake up in CIA custody with careers that were effectively over. "What the hell is happening?" Kane's voice cut through his team's radio chatter. This was supposed to be a simple extraction. Max smiled coldly as he listened to Kane's confusion through intercepted communications. The former CIA operative was discovering that betraying his country came with consequences he'd never imagined. The third operative, a former Navy SEAL named Fernando Hansen, proved more resilient. He'd recognized the tactical sophistication of the ambush and was trying to reach Kane's position through a route that Max had deliberately left unguarded. "Fernando's moving toward your position," Sammy warned. "Looks like he's going for a flanking maneuver." "Let him come," Max replied. "I want Kane to see what happens to people who threaten my family." Fernando burst into the server room with his assault rifle raised, expecting to find Ross and Max in a hostage situation. Instead, he found Max waiting in perfect shooting position, his own rifle trained on the doorway with unwavering precision. "Drop your weapon," Max commanded. His voice carried the flat authority of someone completely comfortable with killing. Fernando was professional enough to recognize superior position and firepower. His rifle clattered to the floor as he raised his hands, but his eyes showed the calculation of a man looking for opportunities. "Smart choice," Max said. "Now call your boss. Tell him you've secured the package and he should come up alone. He won't believe it. He will if Ross confirms it." Max walked to where Ross hung, semi-conscious in the server chair, his face gray with blood loss, but his eyes still aware. A gentle tap to his wounded side brought a scream that would carry through the building's communication system. "Kane!" Ross gasped into his headset. "Fernando has the situation controlled. Package is secure. Come alone. Too many people will compromise extraction." It was the kind of tactical lie that Kane would recognize as sound reasoning. Smaller teams moved faster and attracted less attention. Basic principles that any competent operative would understand. On my way, Kane's voice crackled through the radio. Max zip-tied Fernando to a support beam and checked his equipment one final time. The building was secure. His team had eliminated Kane's backup, and all that remained was the confrontation he'd been planning since that 3 a.m. phone call from Portland General Hospital. Marcus Kane appeared in the server room doorway 5 minutes later, his expensive suit and manicured appearance a jarring contrast to the industrial surroundings. At 55, he looked more like a successful businessman than a traitor who'd sold American secrets to hostile intelligence services. "Hello, Marcus," Max said quietly. "It's been a long time." Kane's eyes widened as he recognized the voice. 15 years older, but carrying the same deadly certainty that had made Max legendary in certain CIA circles. "You're supposed to be dead," Kane said, his hand moving toward the pistol in his shoulder holster. "Syria, 2010, Max replied. "Your information got 3 of my people killed. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since." The pistol never cleared Kane's jacket. Max's combat knife took him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending the weapon skittering across the floor. Kane crashed into the server bank, blood streaming from a wound that was precisely calculated to disable without killing. "That's for Rodriguez, Chun, and Petrov," Max said conversationally. "The 3 operators who died because you sold their insertion route to Syrian intelligence." Kane writhed on the floor, clutching his shoulder while staring up at Max with a mixture of pain and recognition. "The ghost. Jesus Christ, you're the ghost." "Ross here didn't believe me when I told him that," Max said, gesturing toward his semi-conscious partner. "He thought 15 years of civilian life had made me soft." He walked to Kane's position and knelt beside the wounded traitor. "But you know better, don't you, Marcus? You remember what I was capable of when I had rules to follow. Imagine what I'm capable of now." Kane's eyes showed the terror of a man who understood exactly what kind of predator had trapped him. "What do you want?" "I want the names of every buyer you've contacted, every intelligence service you've sold information to, every American asset you've compromised." Max's voice carried the patient menace of someone with unlimited time and unlimited methods. "And I want to know who else knew about the operation to kill my family." "I'll give you everything," Kane gasped. "Complete files, contact information, financial records. Just make it quick." Max almost smiled. "Quick? You tortured a 78-year-old man for information. You hired killers to murder my wife and children. You betrayed operations that got American soldiers killed." He stood and walked to his equipment bag, removing items that made Kane's breathing accelerate with terror. "Death is too good for you, Marcus. You're going to live long enough to see every network you built destroyed, every contact you made arrested, every dollar you earned confiscated. The CIA will want intelligence more than revenge," Kane said desperately. "I can give them a complete breakdown of foreign intelligence operations in the Pacific Northwest." "I'm sure they'll be very grateful," Max agreed. "After you spend 20 or 30 years in a federal supermax prison, contemplating the consequences of treason." Through the server room's windows, Max could see federal vehicles surrounding the building. Preston and his CIA team were moving into position to secure the scene and begin processing the intelligence windfall that Kane and Ross represented. The Ghos hunt was nearly complete. Justice for his father, protection for his family, and security for his country, all achieved through the application of skills he'd hoped never to use again. But some ghosts never truly rest, and some betrayals can only be answered with blood. Chapter 9. The Ghost's Justice. 6 months later, Max stood in the visiting room of ADX Florence, the federal supermax prison where Marcus Kane was serving consecutive life sentences for treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. Kane looked older, grayer, diminished by solitary confinement and the knowledge that he would never see freedom again. "Your partner died in the hospital," Max said without preamble. "Blood loss from internal injuries. The doctor said he suffered for hours before the end." Kane's hands trembled slightly, a nervous tic he'd developed since his incarceration. "I hear the CIA rolled up the entire network." Arrested buyers in 12 countries. 47 arrests worldwide. Max confirmed. $2 billion in assets frozen. 3 hostile intelligence operations completely compromised. He paused. Your cooperation was very helpful. The compliment was deliberate mockery. Kane had broken completely during interrogation, providing information that dismantled a decade of carefully constructed espionage networks. His betrayal of America had been followed by his betrayal of everyone he'd worked with, a fitting into a career built on selling loyalty to the highest bidder. "How's your father?" Max's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. He made a full recovery. Remarkable resilience for a 78-year-old man. "And your family?" "Safe. Happy. My children ask about Uncle Ross sometimes, but they're young enough to accept that some people just disappear from their lives." Kane nodded, understanding the subtext. Max's family would never know how close they'd come to being murdered, would never learn about their father's transformation from businessman back to killer. Some secrets were too dark to share with the people you love most. "Was it worth it?" Kane asked. "Destroying everything you'd built to get revenge?" Max considered the question seriously. Data vault technologies have been sold to a defense contractor, its quantum encryption technology now exclusively serving American military interests. His civilian identity was officially dead, replaced by a new cover identity that allowed him to work for the CIA's Special Activities Center once again. "I didn't destroy anything," Max said finally. "I reclaimed something I temporarily misplaced." He stood to leave, then paused. "Marcus, I want you to understand something. Every day for the rest of your life, you're going to remember that you threatened my children. And every day, you're going to be grateful that I let you live to see the inside of this cage." Kane's face went pale. "You could have killed me. Death would have been mercy," Max replied. "This is justice." As Max walked through the prison security checkpoints, his phone buzzed with a message from Preston. "New assignment ready for briefing. High priority. How soon can you be in Langley?" Max smiled. The first genuine smile he'd felt since this entire nightmare began. The Ghost was officially back in service, and America had enemies who needed reminding that some legends never truly retire. Outside the prison, his father Alfred waited in the passenger seat of Max's rental car. The old Marine had insisted on accompanying his son to Kane's prison, claiming he wanted to look the man who'd tortured him in the eye one final time. "How did he look?" Alfred asked as Max started the engine. "Broken. Scared. Exactly like he should." Alfred nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences." As they drove through the Colorado mountains toward Denver International Airport, Max reflected on the past 6 months. Ross was dead. Kane was imprisoned. The foreign intelligence networks were dismantled, and America's military secrets remained secure. His family was safe, his father had healed, and justice had been served. But the cost had been significant. Max's comfortable civilian life was over, replaced by a return to the shadows where the Ghost belonged. Alice and the children thought he'd taken a consulting position with the Defense Department, a cover story that would allow him to disappear for weeks at a time on operations that officially didn't exist. "Any regrets?" Alfred asked, as if reading his son's thoughts. Max considered the question while watching the mountains roll past. He'd killed Ross Bradshaw in cold blood, tortured Marcus Kane for information, and eliminated Kane's entire Seattle operation without hesitation or remorse. He'd chosen family over law, justice over mercy, and violence over forgiveness. "None," he said finally. "Some ghosts are meant to walk among the living." Alfred squeezed his son's shoulder with hands that still bore the scars of Kane's torture. "Then welcome back to the war, son. Your country needs you." As their plane lifted off toward Washington, D.C. in Max's new assignment, he allowed himself to think about Alice and the children, safe in their new home under federal protection. They would never know the full truth about their husband and father, would never understand the darkness he'd embraced to keep them safe. But that was the burden of being the Ghost, walking in shadows so that the people you love can live in the light. Some legends are built on heroism and honor. Others are forged in blood and vengeance. Max Mahoney had chosen which kind of ghost he wanted to be. And Marcus Kane's network of traders had learned, too late, that some betrayals can never be forgiven.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.